In the past, memos were the primary means of internal communication in a workplace environment. Now, email is used in place of memos in many incidences because it's faster, cheaper, easier to use, and easier to store. However, there are times when memos are a more appropriate communication form to discuss internal business. In this lesson, we are going to address the following objective and being able to recognize the basic elements of memos, identifying the information and appropriate content necessary. Here's a clip from Office Space on the use of a memo for a workplace situation.
Neva speaking. Just a moment. Corporate accounts payable. Neva speaking. Just a moment. Corporate accounts payable. Neva speaking.
Hello, Peter. What's happening? We have sort of a problem here. Yeah, you apparently didn't put one of the new cover sheets on your TPS reports.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry about that. I forgot.
Yeah. You see, we're putting the cover sheets on all TPS reports now before they go out. Did you see the memo about this?
Yeah. Yeah, I have the memo right here. I just forgot. But it's not shipping out till tomorrow, so there's no problem.
Yeah. If you could just go ahead and make sure you do that from now on, that would be great. And I'll go ahead and make sure you get another copy of that memo. Okay?
Yeah, no, I
right,
have
Peter.
the memo. I've got it. It's right. Hello, Bill.
Now, memos are an important form of communication when it's passed between people who've already established contact within a business, as we saw in this clip of The Office. It's also used for communicating between colleagues working together within the same company or in a joint project that involves several companies. An example in landscape architecture would be having a landscape architecture firm sending memos to a client about a project. Memos are a more appropriate form of communication than emails, text messages, or instant messages when a document is longer than can be viewed on a computer screen. It's also important to think about using a memo if your document includes symbols, tables, bulleted lists, bold-faced text, or italics that could be lost on your computer system if a message is received in plain text rather than in HTML text. You can also have a memo include graphics like photos, charts, tables, or icons that would not appear in an email. And in some cases, you need to be able to print a document and have it posted for people to view. An example of this would be at Dole, which processes and bags a lot of salads. And perhaps the employees need to be reminded about workplace practices like wearing caps over their head and not having their hair be in the food, making sure to be sanitary and washing hands after using restrooms or taking a break from work. And that information could be publicly posted on the floor so that every employee receives it. In another situation, documents that contain sensitive information about clients, projects, or personnel decisions are more appropriately addressed through memos than in emails. Let's take a moment and look at a memo and find all the ways that we can make sure to properly format it and include all of the basic elements. What's really great about memos is that there is no one way it has to be formatted. Every company will have a different format for what should be included in a memo. So it's important for you to talk to your colleagues and learn about the formatting style they use for your workplace communication. However, there are a few general elements that are found in a memo. And the first one you want to think about is using letterhead, or at least a heading. And that you want to be able to clearly identify the company who is sending out the message. We also like to use the word memorandum or memo when you want to talk about making sure to clearly identify the type of document being received. Remember that memorandum is singular. Memoranda means that there's more than one memo being sent. It's important to know that you include the date of when the memo is being received. So, date, memo is sent to recipient. It's not the date that you started to write the information. And that could be different. You also want to take note that you want to write out the date, because if you're doing international business, you don't want the day and the month to be confused, particularly in Europe where the day comes before the month in communication. For the to line, it's important to know that you can write to an individual, group, or a generic term for people. So for example, you could say IT department if you're communicating with all the people for the IT department. In the from, you'll notice that the author's name is typed and it includes the initials. The initials in a memo are the equivalent of a signature. You do not sign a memo with a closing. So, initials equal signature in memo. And then lastly, you do a subject line. Revised policy for paid leave benefits. It is okay to capitalize keywords, but articles, prepositions, and conjunctions are only capitalized at the beginning of a sentence. So you would not capitalize for. For this, I'll just say capitalize keywords in subject line. Your first paragraph should state the purpose or subject for the memo. It's important to have only one purpose per memo. If you have more than one topic, consider breaking up the topics into separate memos. So state purpose or subject of memo. And because a memo is not being sent through email like plain text, you can afford to use the formatting techniques we've discussed in previous chapters. An example of this would be headings. Make sure that you include headings or subheadings for your topics. It will help your reader more easily find information. A memo is also great for including a table, such as this. It will preserve the formatting so that you can include bold-faced columns, headings, and be able to have all of your text neatly formatted and not worry about having the days per year switch formatting and change locations if it was sent through email versus being created in the memo. Now, there's nothing new to look at in terms of this page, so let me show you now the second page of the memo. On the second page, it's important that you include or make a header. And as your textbook explained, there's 3 things you include in a header. First, the recipient's name. Second, the page number. And lastly, the date of the memo. This helps organize the communication in case the pages are separated as the recipient's reading the information or it's being delivered to that person. It's important to know that in memos you can use bulleted lists. Now, there is a rule for when a bulleted list is more appropriate than a numbered list. So use bulleted lists in memos, and you use bullets when the information is not sequential, and that it doesn't matter the order of where that information appears. It's unlike a set of instructions where each step must be sequential, and that if you miss a step, something would happen to the product or service that you're making or using. Now, these are the next 2 items I'm going to show you are less common elements in memos, but you could come across them. And the first one is this right here. It's known as the typist's initials. And you would use this when someone else types the memo on behalf of the author. And this is a common practice for CEOs that have secretaries with excellent typing experience, and they will choose to type it on behalf of that author. The other component I want you to be aware of is the CC use. And just like in emails where you can CC someone, you can also do this in a memo. And it's used to include secondary audiences. And it's when these individuals do not have to receive a primary source and be the recipient of the information, but yet they need to be aware of this information. So let me set up the context of why Kathy Myers would have been CC'd in this message. Kathy Myers could be the associate director of the OFA. And then John Smith is the director of the OFA. If John would be at the office, Kathy would need to be aware of these policies for vacation and absences because she would need to reinforce the policy for the organization. But this information really doesn't have to be sent to her directly by the HR person. And lastly, let's talk a little bit about the style of memos. And your style is going to depend on their conciseness, the clarity, and the accessibility to the memo. Right now, it's very common to write a memo, PDF it, and embed it in an email. This is a common practice for really large organizations like Chase, Cargill, Farm Credit Services, United States Department of Agriculture, in which the people need to send out a mass memo to all the employees, but they don't want it to be altered or forwarded or shared any other way. When you write a memo, keep in mind your audience and use simple words, readable sentences, and write specific details relevant to that audience. And consider your credibility. Errors in grammar and punctuation not only reflect poorly on you, but also on the company you represent.